This presentation will provide a brief history and overview of Kurt Lewin and two of his most noted theories and models. Kurt Lewin was a German-American psychologist known as one of the pioneers of social, organizational, and applied psychology. He is credited as the first to study group dynamics and organizational development. Today, we will go over a bit of his background and two of his most famous theories and models, the force field analysis and the three-stage change model. Lewin was born in Germany in 1890 and began his education and studies there. He served as a soldier in World War I, but was wounded and returned to Germany, obtaining his doctorate from the University of Berlin in 1916. During his doctoral research, Lewin became increasingly interested in philosophical science, Gestalt psychology, and group dynamics. His research gained much attention as a well-published psychologist, and in 1930, Lewin was invited to the University of Stanford as a visiting professor. In 1933, because of Hitler's rise to power in Germany, he decided to immigrate to the United States with his wife and daughter. He worked at Cornell University and the University of Iowa until 1944, when he helped to establish the Research Center for Group Dynamics at MIT. It was during this time that he became famous for his research in group dynamics, specifically force field analysis and the three-stage change model. Lewin's theory of force field analysis essentially defines and describes all forces supporting and opposing a desired change and uses that information to determine the viability of the change. This model is used as a framework and simple visual tool for leaders. It identifies the factors and forces that influence both sides of a situation, identifying driving forces that provide momentum toward a goal, as well as resisting or restraining forces that work to block or hinder change. It helps indicate the underlying balance of power and identify potential stakeholders and their positions to better prepare for and make decisions. Part of the reason that this model is successful is that it calls on leaders to look at situations as a whole versus focusing on smaller or more individual aspects of a scenario. Each identified force is ranked on a 1 to 5-point scale based on their level of influence, 1 being very weak and 5 being extremely strong. Once all forces have been identified, each side can be totaled and a leader can determine the feasibility of the desired change. The stakeholders can then review the forces to determine potential mitigation strategies that might change the overall balance and potentially support the decision or change. Take, for example, a change that all of us have experienced on some level. Wearing a face mask to help prevent the spread of COVID-19 would be identified as the desired behavior. There are forces on both sides in support and in opposition of this behavior. Lewin's force field analysis would be useful to identify the fact that this change does seem feasible, and it can also work to identify opposing forces that can be planned for and later dealt with accordingly. Lewin's three-stage change model breaks down any change into three equally important phases. Each phase should be considered thoughtfully in order to ensure a change becomes sustainable and permanent. The three-stage change model, also known as the Lewin change model and unfreeze change refreeze method, is a model developed by Lewin describing the change process to help us gain a better understanding of it. The first stage is called unfreezing. This is where we recognize the need for change, determine what behaviors and/or attitudes need to be changed, and ensure there is adequate support and communication to move forward toward the second stage. By identifying the impact of the current issues or problems, you help those impacted become aware of the why to help them unfreeze. Lewin's force field analysis can be used to assist with this step by better understanding the change. Be aware that aspects of change relating to uncertainty or cultural shifts can make unfreezing difficult for some employees and will require strong guidance and support from leadership. The second stage is the actual change. During this transitional stage, the determined changes are implemented. Support, again, is critical here to ensure the appropriate changes are being made and understood. The change stage can be difficult due to employees being forced to adapt, overcome their fears or resistance, and implement the actual change. The final stage is called freezing or refreezing. During this stage, changes are reinforced, rewarded, and stabilized. Successes are celebrated, and the goal is to integrate these changes into the culture of the organization and treat it as the norm. Lewin's three-step process is regarded as a foundational model for making change in organizations. An example of this change model in use would be the Traeger company transition. In the unfreeze stage, the CEO identified what behaviors and attitudes needed to be changed to work toward a healthier company culture. This included numerous meetings and cultural surveys to gain a deeper understanding of the underlying issues. He also prepared for the change by hiring some trusted executives that he could rely on to assist with the transition and created the plan in secret. In the change stage, the company changed their location and evaluated employees based on new company goals and norms, letting go of and moving employees as needed. Specific steps were taken to enhance the physical environment to make it more reflective of the company and their desired culture and values. During the refreeze stage, employees are praised and rewarded for adapting to the new company culture, and the change is successfully integrated as the norm. To help sustain the change, company gatherings have become routine and are focused on supporting the new, open, and supportive culture needed to help enhance the business aspects of the company. So remember, Lewin's force field analysis identifies and ranks all forces in favor and resistance of a desired change and uses this information to determine the feasibility of the change. It can also be useful to identify and plan for potential hindrances. The three-stage change model reminds us that it is important to unfreeze behavior before changing it and then refreezing that new desired behavior. It's like thawing your frozen food before you cook it. Now you will have the opportunity to use these models in connection with changes that you are familiar with. Consider a potential change for the force field analysis and a change that has already occurred for the three-stage change model. See you out there!